Welcome to the Port Aransas Parks and Recreation Brown Bag Lunch number 3. Today we have Cliff Strain, who is the director of Port Aransas Museum. Hello, Cliff.
Hello. Welcome to the museum. So I am the director of PAFA, which is Port Aransas Preservation and Historical Association. It's a mouthful. And we are the parent organization to the museum, Port Aransas Historical Museum, and the Farley Boat Works, which is located on Avenue C. And of course, we're here on the corner of Brunderet and Allister. And if you've never been in this museum, you should treat yourself and come by when we're open. We have a number of historical artifacts on display. Right now, our current exhibit is the Tarpon Era, which talks about all the activities and events of the town when tarpon were extremely numerous, and the main reason why people came to Port Aransas was to catch a tarpon. It was on their bucket list, or they're just considered that they were shot fishermen and wanted a real challenge. A tarpon was the fish for them. And of course, it chronicles times when the original guides were rowing their customers to where eventually most of them were running boats built right here in town, the Farley boat. And of course, this is the Manny boat, which was its sister boat, took FDR fishing. Both were owned by Ted Matthews, who was a really great Port Aransas figure in our history, and just a really great person in our town. And he had 2 kids, Manny, who just passed away a few months ago, and Marcy, and named both boats after them. And we do have the Manny boat. This was such a classic, iconic artifact from the tarpon era, because it was a boat designed specifically to catch tarpon. It was designed low to the water. The fishermen sat pretty low in. Those were the chairs that they had fashioned for use in those days. And it was designed to take the rough water at the outer edges of the paths, and also make it easy to pull the fish over. And when you put them in gear, they troll very slowly, which was a big advantage if you were trolling live bait, which many of them did. And of course, we have the lighthouse lens that was in the lighthouse when it was decommissioned. And of course, this wasn't the original lens, and most of you know probably at least one of the stories of the lens that was originally in there. One is that it was taken out by Confederates and buried in the swamps, but it's never showed back up. And we do know that the lighthouse was blown up at the end of the Civil War, and I kind of wonder why they would blow it up if the lens was not in it already. And when they did, they used 4 powder kegs. It was something that one of the Confederate generals wanted all the lighthouses blown up on the Texas coast. Ours was the only one they actually went through with it. They said when they blew it up, an eyewitness said the top 20 feet blew apart and the spiral staircase went shooting up like a rocket out of the top. So we do know from the U.S. Light Service records that they did repair the top 20 feet and replace the staircase. And this is the lens that was put back in place till it was decommissioning in 1954. And of course, probably the most exciting thing to talk about here in the museum is the interesting relationship between the lighthouse and the jetties. The story of the jetties is also a really big part of Port Aransas, because we really couldn't even be a port till the jetties were mostly done. This is a great chart because it shows what had happened in 40 years. So here's the lighthouse, completed in 1857, before Lincoln was president. And here's the pass in 1897. So in 40 years, this pass had moved over a mile to the south and changed its shape, its location, and its depth all the time, which made pilots a very important part of the Port Aransas history. And that's why we spend a lot of time also talking about the Mercer family. But it's just interesting. It took 5 attempts at building jetties. This was the 4th one. This was the Hop jetty. And people always wonder, why do we have one straight jetty and one curved jetty, and if you come around and see a 1983 aerial view, you see that hop jetty, they just added to it. Here's that hop jetty that was mid-channel and not touching. They added onto it, and then of course they built the railroad out to build the south jetty, and that was the Army Corps of Engineers that got involved just a few years later. And if you come to the museum, you can ring the bell that was on the locomotive that actually built the south jetty. It's got quite a bit of resonance. Most people are a little more gingerly when they hit it, but a good firm whack is not. It's not going to hurt this bell. It's about that thick where it flares out at the back, at the bottom. And also, the one thing we do here, besides being at the museum, we also take people to the chapel on the dunes, and that's become very popular because in the November issue of Texas Highways, it was highlighted in a very good article talking about the artwork in the center on the inside of the chapel, and it's gotten a lot more attention. We're doing a lot more tours of the chapel. We do them off schedule, and of course anytime for our members, and of course for a nominal donation, anybody out of town can schedule an off schedule tour. But we do them regularly, first and third Saturdays of each month at 9:15. So if you haven't seen the chapel, you're welcome to come on a Saturday, and if we fill up that group, because we're only doing 10 with COVID, we'll do another group at 11. So it's quite an interesting. Of course, it was built by a woman that was really just a Renaissance woman of her times, Adeline Carter, and her family still owns the property and still very involved. We see her great-grandson all the time, and if you missed our lecture series by him, hopefully we're going to bring him back, and we're going to put it on YouTube, because it was a great story of the history of the family of the Carters. Also, we talk about here's more stuff on the jetty exhibit. We talk about the Eastern European immigrants like McBride here that helped build the jetties. Of course, they were completed in 1919. 1910 they were mostly done, and that's when we named ourselves Port Aransas. And but the interesting story about McBride here that a lot of people don't realize, we have another picture of him. As you see here, he's got his hand bandaged up, his shoulders look like they've really taken a beating. Doing this for 14 hours a day, lifting up rocks out of a boxcar and dumping them into the water was a pretty tough job. And when McBride and some of the other Eastern European immigrants that were working on the jetties tried to get into the local saloon in town, they were not allowed in. And the people that owned that one saloon that we were allowed to have were being prejudiced against them. So Tom Matthews, if you come around here, he decided to do something about it. He built a bar on a schooner, and it was called the Deepwater Saloon. And he, also of Eastern European descent, allowed anybody to come in and drink in his establishment. So they pulled it up close to the flats, kept it in the water, and they could drink anytime, have their drink without being turned away at the door. And if we come over here, this is a picture of the same guy. This is McBride right here with a bunch of his buddies drinking in front of the Deepwater Saloon. You see he looks a lot happier. His hands are not bandaged up. He's got his going to town clothes on, and they were able to overcome that social injustice. And I think both these pictures were in the museum for several months before Mark Young pointed out to me, hey, did you know that that's him there too? And it really kind of brought the whole story full circle.
Cliff, what has happened to the museum, the boatworks, all of the historical association through COVID?
Well, we've lost a lot of attendance, and a lot of docents. We've had some docents come. We have one out right now because her family, one of her family members had COVID, so she was quarantining. But we just didn't get the volunteer help we get at Farley Boat Works to continue some of our big builds like the scow schooner, the Lineam that we're building. We just couldn't progress on that. We lost a lot of money through donations that we got through walk-in people in the museum. However, the chapel tours have helped compensate for some of that. But we've been open since Memorial Day, and we just keep people spaced out. We limit the number of people in the chapel, in the museum. We do request masks worn the entire time you're in the museum. Farley Boat Works as long as you're outside, and same thing also in the chapel, we require that. We're just trying to keep everybody healthy and get to where everybody's had a vaccination and when things can start to go back to normal. We also had to postpone our Wind Boat Festival twice. I think it's going to be now held in the fall. And our gala is a big question mark. We're hoping that at the very end of April, beginning of May, we still will be able to use our Wooden Boat Festival dates to do our gala. And but up to that point, we're not sure. And of course, some of our boat building classes we really can't do yet till we can get people in a situation. It's pretty hard to teach somebody how to build a boat and stay socially distanced. So we really want to bring the local kids back into Farley Boat Works building boats, and of course vacationing kids and families building boats again. We do have boat builds going on, but it's by individuals, and they are pretty spaced out in the building barn.
Well, thank you, Cliff. We really appreciate you telling us about everything that's going on with the Historical Association, and you can find out more about the Historical Association at portaransasmuseum.org and on their Facebook page and the Farley Boat Works Facebook page, YouTube channel. It's out there. So.
And also, we are doing the IGA has been very gracious to sponsor us in a 2-month-long fundraiser at the cash register. So if you're picking up some groceries, you can also donate right there at the IGA. And Mike Hall was really wonderful to help with that.
All right. Well, thank you very much.